Hello, happy Wednesday. This is Wednesday Coffee with me, Pastor Justin. It is July the 15th, 2026. I think it was 6 weeks ago that Pastor Austin and I decided that we would do this together every Wednesday from here on out. Not realizing, of course, that we had something like 5 consecutive weeks of camps and mission trips between us over the 5 weeks following. So we haven't yet gotten to do that much. We'll return to that, I think, next week. This week, Pastor Austin is on mission trip with our Cairo youth, our middle school youth. They've gone up to Oklahoma together, and I certainly covet your prayers for them, that God would watch over them and keep them safe, work transformation in them, help them to build beautiful community together, serve in meaningful ways, and ultimately bring them home safely later this week. I got the privilege this past week of being at CYLS, Christian Youth Leadership Seminar, at our camp, Disciples Crossing, outside of Athens in East Texas. I talked a little bit about this in my sermon on Sunday. It was amazing. I mean, it was holy. Just a privilege to be out there with these young people, reconnect with some of my peers who were there as adult leaders, and then just witness, the beautiful things that God was doing through these young people, as they came together and centered themselves in the love of God and Jesus, and they built this beautiful community where no one was a stranger, and they loved on each other and took care of each other and explored together. It was an amazing experience. And as I said on Sunday, for all the concerns we have about, the world and our future, the kids are all right. The Spirit is still working, and we've got some amazing young people in our community and in this world. One of my favorite things about the experience was the questions. Beautiful questions. I love questions. And I had the privilege of being the keynoter. I had to reimagine my approach to that because of just how much the young people engaged, all the beautiful questions they had. I also had the chance to kind of sit with them in a workshop setting and just do Q&A, right? Passed a hat, invited them to, take a note card and write a question down. And then we just discussed. And I mean, we had an hour, and maybe we got through half the questions that they asked. It was beautiful. Let me just share with you, and I wish I'd brought all of them back with me. I mean, I could go on and on, but let me just share a few of the questions that these young people asked and that we discussed last week. Here, just a couple examples here. All right, here's one. When it comes to God-given purpose, does what I want matter? Does what I want matter, or the implication there, should I be sort of, trying to kind of minimize what I want, and give myself over increasingly to what God might want for me and my purpose? Great question. Why? This is an age-old question, right? Connected to the problem of theodicy, of evil. Why would a just God allow people to be born into such different circumstances? It seems like some people never even really have a chance. Just love that level of heart awareness from a 16-year-old. How about this? I never would have seen this question coming from a 17-year-old. Is Gnosticism a valid theological approach? All right. Do you see God as more of an entity or more of a force? How about this loving question? What are some strategies for supporting someone who is grieving? Great question. Important question. What are some ways that I can become less individualistic? I love this. Isn't it amazing? It's a great question, important. We should all be asking that question. What about this one? We talked a lot about in keynote about identity, about purpose, who we are, who God is calling us, how God is calling us to be in the world as both individuals and as community. How do we shape community based on that? How do we go out and mission? That was kind of our arc for the week. I loved this question too. How do you know? How do you know if you're following God's direction for you? Like, how do you know if you're letting your emotions get in the way of your understanding of that direction and not listening enough to God? Great questions. And here's what I would say for all of us. Here's what I would encourage you to take away from this. If you're part of this congregation, you know that I talk about this often, right? But questions themselves are critically important, right? You've heard me say before, if you've been in worship here, that Henry Nouwen said this in the 20th century. We're so focused on finding the answers, he says, when our real call is to live the questions. And I struggled with that when I first read that line in one of his books. But ultimately, I think, and I understand the irony here. I'm not trying to tie that up in a pretty bow, because not doing that is exactly the point, right? But I think kind of what he's getting at is this idea that the very process of wrestling with hard questions like this, okay, the very process of seeking the divine is itself in many ways the answer, right? We're so focused on finding all the answers, and sometimes we want to make that faith, right? It's like I'm gonna figure all of these things out, and then I'll have this nice, clean understanding of what to do and what not to do in this world, and we want to call that faith. When really the important thing when it comes to faith is always seeking, right? No matter how much we've learned, always being open to a deeper understanding of who God is and who God is calling us to be. Always asking questions, always wrestling, right? Always seeking to go deeper in our love of God and neighbor. Hold that, friends. If you're wrestling with questions and you're frustrated with the fact that maybe you're not finding the answers you want, I hope you'll find some peace in the possibility that living the questions, that the journey itself is at least as important as having the answers. God bless you. Go in peace this week and continue to ask hard questions, friend.